If the road beneath your feet could speak, what would it say? Not about the cars speeding by or the hurried footsteps, but about the silent centuries that shaped its very stones. A story with no wars, no heroes, and yet it winds through every step you take. This is history no one ever taught you, and you've walked through it your whole life without even noticing. Night has fallen. All worries seem to fade away. Close your eyes and let this voice guide you, beyond the rushing currents of time, back to a quiet corner of history where events unfold slowly, and the tiniest details are woven into the fabric of the past. Tonight we begin a long journey together, to listen to the story of the silent evolution of roads, from humble footpaths to enduring stone-paved ways. Take a deep, gentle breath. Before roads had names. Long before cities had names, before highways carved their veins across the land, there were paths, quiet, unmarked, and barely visible to the eye. These weren't planned. No architect drew them. No government approved their construction. They simply happened. A deer nudged through a thicket once, perhaps in search of water. A fox trotted behind her days later, nose to the ground. A human, barefoot, curious, wandered along that same trace, ducking under low branches, stepping where the grass was already slightly bent. None of them thought to leave a trail. They were simply passing through. And yet, the land remembered. It begins with just a step. One foot pressing down on moss or grass or leaves, barely leaving a mark. The earth gives a little, the green flattens, and a whisper of a line is drawn. Then another foot. And another. The first few imprints are nothing permanent. A rainstorm might wash them away. A gust of wind might scatter the leaves back in place. But if the steps return, if the rhythm of movement continues, something changes. Patterns begin to emerge. The ground, trampled just enough, starts to firm. Plants hesitate to grow back where feet constantly fall. The wild resists at first. Grasses sway back defiantly, fallen leaves try to cover the signs. But time, that quiet sculptor, is persistent. What was once a random disturbance becomes a route. The animals know it first. They follow with instinct, retracing their own steps through instinctive maps passed down not in stories, but in scent and memory. Humans come next, driven by need. Maybe there's water nearby. Or shelter. Maybe one person says to another, "Come, I know a way through." And now it's 2 sets of feet. Then 3. Then more. The forest does not protest. It watches. And so, what was once a mere bruise on the greenery deepens into something lasting. A path. Not a road. Not yet. It winds as nature allows, curving around boulders, skirting marshy patches, ducking under ancient limbs of trees that grew long before anyone thought to walk here. No one owns it. No one calls it theirs. But still it becomes something communal. A quiet agreement between those who use it and the land that bears it. In some places children begin to run along it, their laughter light and scattered like wind chimes. In others, elders tread it with slow reverence, remembering the first time they walked that way when the grass still tried to fight back. Paths are strange like that. They hold memory without effort. A path doesn't speak, but it tells stories all the same. About how people once moved. About what mattered enough to walk toward. Some lead to rivers. Others to rest. Some to nothing in particular, just the joy of going. And over time, something inevitable happens. Someone comes with an idea. What if we made it easier? What if we laid stones here to keep the mud away? What if we cleared the low branches, made room for a cart? That first path, once the gentlest trace of motion, begins to transform. It becomes straighter, wider. Wheels etch grooves. People stop noticing the forest around them. They hurry now, the way forward too easy, too certain. Eventually it becomes a road. And the road forgets it was once a path. The people who speed across it forget that once this way was walked barefoot. That before the paving machines, before the signs and painted lines, there were quiet moments. Small choices. an animal moving through the trees, a human following softly behind. But sometimes, just sometimes, you can still see it. If you step off the shoulder of a highway and look closely at the land beside it, you might find a faint trail running parallel. Almost invisible but still there. It dips where the hill dips. It curves gently around trees the road had no patience for. It's older, softer, slower. That's the original way. The way of first footsteps. The way that asked, not demanded. The way that listened before it spoke. Every great road began as something much smaller. Something uncertain. A hesitation in the grass. A question of direction. The grand boulevards of today, with their traffic and noise and unyielding speed, have ancestors, humble, meandering, and made not by force but by presence. It's easy to forget that. We're told to plan, to chart, to pave. To make progress with confidence and maps and deadlines. But sometimes the most meaningful ways forward are not the ones we force, but the ones we follow. The ones that appear slowly only after we've passed the same way enough times that the earth itself remembers us. So maybe there's a lesson in the loimon, the quiet, early paths. Maybe the next time we face a tangled forest in life, something unplanned, unknown, we might pause. Look around. Listen. And take one step. Not a leap. Not a rush. Just a step. Then another. Then another. Who knows? Years from now, someone else might follow that very same trail and say, "This is the way." But only because once upon a time someone walked it first. The path that wasn't meant to be a path. It didn't begin as a path. It began as a single step, quiet, unnoticed. A foot pressed gently into the grass one early morning, perhaps by someone in a hurry, or simply curious to take a shortcut. No one thought anything of it. Why would they? It was just grass. Grass grows back. And it did at first. Resilient, it sprang up again after each step, like a silent protest against disturbance. The green blades, soft and defiant, pushed upward overnight, erasing the memory of the day. But footsteps kept coming. Not many. Just enough. One today, maybe two tomorrow. Then for the day after that. Each step by itself meant nothing. But together they began to whisper a pattern. The blades of grass bent more easily as the days passed. They grew tired of standing up. Not out of weakness but weariness. There's a difference. At first they clung to their green, their shape, their dignity. But eventually the life in them dulled. Their color faded from vibrant to washed out. The bounce left their stems. They began to lie down and stay down. What was once a lush patch of green became a soft depression in the field. And still no one called it a path. People walked across it, sure, with their bags, their boots, their distractions, never stopping to look at what their repetition had wrought. The grass, now thin and brittle, no longer stood a chance. Below it the earth began to show. A dark brown streak cutting quietly across the clearing, like a scar that no one wanted to admit was there. It wasn't paved. It wasn't marked. There were no signs, no boundaries, no intent. Just happened. A line appeared. It cut between two bushes, barely wide enough for a single person to pass. But they passed nonetheless. Every morning. Every afternoon. Not because it was beautiful or easy, but because it was familiar. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. To follow where feet had already fallen. To walk where walking was made easier by those before you. Even if no one ever asked why the first step was taken. There's something deeply human about that. We often think of habits as choices, as if we sit down and carefully carve out every groove in our lives. But many of the roads we travel, the mental ruts, the emotional cycles, even the daily routines, they aren't drawn with purpose. They emerge the way that path did. Through repetition. Through quiet consistency. through the slow, steady erosion of resistance. The path didn't come with a sign saying, "This is the way." It didn't offer rewards. It didn't even offer clarity. It simply offered familiarity, the comfort of having been walked before. And sometimes that's all it takes for us to follow. It's strange, isn't it? How something unintended can become inevitable. You look at that trail one day winding between the bushes, compacted and colorless, and you can't imagine the field without it. It feels permanent, like it was always meant to be there. But if you trace it back step by step, you'll find it began with no plan. Just a moment. A whim. A step off the usual course. Then another. And another. Until the grass surrendered. Until the earth gave way. Until the wildness was shaped, not by design but by repetition. And there's a quiet sadness to that. Because once the path is there, it's hard not to take it. Even when it doesn't lead where we truly want to go. Even when the long way around might have offered more wonder, more color, more life. The path that wasn't meant to be becomes the one we take, because it's easier than carving out a new one. But this story isn't about regret. Not entirely. It's also about awareness. Because the moment you realize the path you're on wasn't made for you, wasn't chosen by you, is the moment you can choose something else. The moment you stop mid-step, look down, and notice the worn-out grass beneath your feet, that's the moment of awakening. It's the moment you see that not every road is worth following just because others have walked it. Some paths need rest. Some need time to heal. And sometimes the boldest thing we can do is step off the trail entirely. To turn toward the untamed. To walk through tall grass that resists. To push gently past the branches that haven't yet learned to bend. It's not easy. And it's not fast. But in time, a new path begins. One that doesn't just repeat what was done before but invites something different. Something more alive. And maybe that's the real beauty of paths. Not the ones worn by habit but the ones formed by conscious choice. Not the ones we inherit but the ones we create. Slowly, tenderly, step by step, knowing that each footfall is a beginning, not an echo. So next time you see a trail, in a field, in your mind, in your life, pause. Ask yourself, did I choose this path or did it choose me? And if the answer is unclear, know this, it's never too late to begin again. The grass still grows. The wild still waits. And you still have time to walk a different way. The path that grew beneath our feet. A quiet story of rain, sun, and the steps that make a way. It doesn't announce itself. There's no signpost. No grand beginning, no triumphant end. It's just there, a narrow strip of earth where the grass has quietly learned to give way. A path, if you want to call it that. Faint at first, as if hesitant to declare its presence. But look closely and you'll see how the earth remembers. The rain comes first. Not the kind that storms in with fury. No, this rain is gentle. Almost shy. It falls in a hush, like a whisper across the skin of the world. Drop by drop, it seeps into the soil, softening the edges, inviting the earth to breathe. And though it might seem like nothing changes, beneath the surface something stirs. The rain doesn't shape the path directly, but it prepares it, loosening, cleansing, nurturing. And then the sun. After the rain, the clouds drift apart like curtains slowly drawn, revealing the gold-threaded light of morning. It slips through the leaves above, dancing down in scattered patches of brilliance. On the path, these sunbeams shimmer like tiny promises. Here a glint, there a glow, tracing the journey of the day. The light doesn't blaze, it glimmers. It doesn't push, it invites. And the path, kissed by warmth and shadow alike, begins to speak in its own quiet language. But of course, rain and sunlight alone do not make a path. The real architect is much older. much humbler. It's the footstep. Not one, not two, but thousands, tens of thousands. A mother carrying water from the well. A child chasing a dragonfly. A man returning from the field with tired shoulders. Over and over. Day after day. Season after season. Not dramatic, not heroic. Just life repeated. Just the ordinary rhythm of people moving from one familiar place to another. That's the thing about this path, it doesn't lead to anything legendary. No mountaintop temple. No hidden treasure. No city of gold. It goes from a door to a gate. From a garden to a tree. From home to home. And yet, in this simplicity lies its depth. Because the path isn't about where it ends. It's about how it came to be. Look closely and you'll see the signs. The way the soil is packed firm not by machinery but by memory. The slight depression in the middle, carved not by wheels but by saws. Each turn, each bend, each careful curve wasn't planned. It was felt. Learned. Trusted. This path was not built. It grew. It grew out of need, out of repetition, out of the soft insistence of presence. And though no one marked its birth and no one will likely celebrate its persistence, it endures. Quietly. Faithfully. It has weathered seasons. In spring it welcomes the scent of new leaves and the first curious ants of the year. In summer, it warms under barefoot laughter and buzzing cicadas. In autumn, it holds the crisp crunch of fallen leaves and the melancholy of things fading. And in winter, when it lies hidden under frost or drifts of white, it waits. Remembers. Sometimes the path narrows. Grass begins to reclaim its edges. Nature gently asks, "Do you still need this?" And sometimes people stop walking. A new road is paved nearby. A gate is moved. Lives change. The path sighs but doesn't protest. It accepts. It has always understood impermanence. But if, one day, someone returns, perhaps a grandchild of the one who once walked it barefoot, it will welcome them without question. As if the years had been a mere pause in conversation. That's the magic of such paths. They are not monuments, yet they are full of history. They are not sacred, yet they hold reverence. They are not art, yet they carry beauty, raw, real, and rooted in the everyday. In a world that rushes toward the new, the dazzling, the extraordinary, this path remains a quiet testament to the value of the known, the repeated, the deeply human act of going not somewhere special but somewhere familiar, and doing it again and again until the earth itself joins the memory. Perhaps, in the end, it is not the towering achievements or spectacular destinations that shape us most. Perhaps it is the steps we take when we're not thinking. The walks we repeat without fanfare. The trails we carve simply by showing up. And maybe that's why, even without meaning to, we look down sometimes, when we're walking through fields or forests or even just across a backyard, and feel a strange affection for that narrow, worn track underfoot. Feels like something old. Something true. Because it is. It's the story of how movement becomes memory. How presence becomes path. And how even the smallest act, taking one more step, can shape the earth beneath us. So next time it rains gently and the leaves above catch light like stained glass, look down. Notice the line where the grass gives way. Think of the feet that came before you and the stories they might have carried. And if the path ends nowhere grand, smile. That's not the point. It connects what matters. This moment, this place, this quiet life. And sometimes that is more than enough. The road we make with our feet. It always starts with a single step. No map, no destination written in stone, just a person choosing to move forward, perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps out of necessity. That step presses into the soft earth, leaving behind no more than a trace. And then another follows. The same person or someone else walking behind, tracing the same path without knowing why. At first it's nothing more than a narrow line through the grass. A temporary sign that someone had been here. But when more footsteps pass the same way, the grass begins to bend permanently, folding under the gentle insistence of repetition. There is no fanfare, no announcement. The path does not suddenly appear. It emerges quietly, shaped not by intention but by habit. This is how people make roads. Not all roads come from blueprints or bulldozers. Some come from the quiet insistence of doing something again and again, not because it's the fastest way or the easiest, but because it's the one that feels right. The one that speaks to a need deeper than convenience. The trail widens over time. Feet tread more confidently now. The obstacles that once seemed daunting, a loose branch here, a stubborn rock there, are gently nudged aside, not with grand effort but with small, repeated gestures. One walker moves a stone. Another clears some leaves. Slowly the path becomes smoother, clearer. Not because someone commanded it to be, but because many people cared enough to walk it. And then, someone brings a handful of gravel. Perhaps it's a child, copying what they saw an elder do. Or perhaps it's someone older, who knows how rain can turn dirt into slippery danger. They scatter the gravel like seeds, not expecting applause, just hoping it helps. The small stones settle into the soil, each one a quiet contribution to something larger than itself. There's a kind of grace in this kind of road building. It isn't loud. It doesn't require permission. It doesn't disrupt the earth, it converses with it. It accepts the natural curves of the land, the rise and fall of the terrain, the mood of the weather. It listens. And in listening, it becomes something alive. As the days pass, the sun does its part. Its warmth coaxes the dampness from the soil. In the early hours, mist may still cling to the air, but by noon the path feels dry and firm beneath bare feet. Dust rises in soft clouds, but it is not the kind of dust that suffocates. It is the kind that reminds you the ground is still here, still holding you up. You can almost hear the road breathing. It does not exist without those who walk it, and yet it becomes something independent, something that guides even those who never knew who walked it first. A quiet companion. A line drawn through the world saying, someone came this way. And perhaps you can too. Not all journeys need grand beginnings. Not all roads need to be planned. Sometimes what lasts is what grows slowly. What we shape through care, not force. There's something deeply human in that. Because in many ways, we are always building these kinds of paths. In our relationships. In the way we learn. In the way we speak to ourselves in the quiet of the night. We may not call it construction. But it is. Each time we show up, even when it's hard. Each time we choose patience over pride. Each time we soften our voice or ask a question instead of pretending to know the answer, we are laying gravel. Clearing the debris. Making something smoother for the next time. It's tempting to believe that only the spectacular matters. That roads should be straight, paved, lined with lights and signs. But look closely, and you'll see that the roads that carry the most meaning are often the ones without a name. They wind through forests, between old houses, beside quiet streams. They are personal, intimate, known by memory rather than by maps. Some of them are literal. You can walk them with your feet. Others are invisible but no less real. The path of trust rebuilt after betrayal. The trail of healing after loss. The small, repeated efforts to forgive someone or to forgive yourself. These too are roads. And they are not made all at once. They are made slowly over days and weeks and years. They are made with tired hands and unsure hearts. They are made when someone chooses to try again. To return. To keep going. And the most beautiful part? They don't need to be perfect. You can stumble on them. You can walk them barefoot. They don't promise that the journey will be easy, only that it is possible. only that you are not the first to try. And when you walk far enough, you'll start to notice the sunlight changing. How it shifts gently through the trees, dappling the path like it's blessing it. Not commanding or declaring, just being there. Warm. Reassuring. A soft reminder that some things take time. That dryness comes after the rain. That light returns. You may look back one day and be surprised at what you've built. Not because you set out to build it, but because you kept showing up. Step by step. Gesture by gesture. Word by word. A road is not always a grand achievement. Sometimes, it is a record of resilience, of kindness, of choosing to return. And perhaps that's what makes it sacred. So the next time you walk a path that feels too narrow, too rough, too winding, remember, the road doesn't need to be finished for you to begin. You don't have to wait for someone else to clear it. The small choices you make, the care you bring, the weight you carry, the lightness you offer, matter. They build something. And maybe, just maybe, someone years from now will walk this same way. They won't know your name. They won't see your footsteps. But they'll feel the ground beneath them, steady and sure, and they'll know. Someone came before. Someone made this walk possible. And that will be enough. The roads that remember. There's something about these old dirt roads that make time feel like it's stretching, like it's folding softly into itself. They are not built for speed. No one here is in a hurry, and even if they were, these roads would not allow it. They insist you slow down. They ask you, gently, persistently, to notice. Along their winding stretch, rutted and cracked by seasons that come and go like old neighbors, the wheels of ox carts still turn. Not the kind of wheels that scream with friction or shriek with brakes, but slow, heavy ones that seem to sigh with each rotation. They creak in the same rhythm as a sleepy breath, a lullaby of a place that has nothing to prove and nothing to chase. Each cart is a little universe of its own. Wooden frames, worn smooth by time and touch, sway gently with every uneven patch of earth. The oxen, strong but quiet, press forward with a kind of knowing, they've done this for years. Maybe generations. Their gait is steady, deliberate, as if they carry not just produce but memory itself. Corn in rough sacks. Baskets of longan or lychee. Sometimes just bundles of firewood, tied tight with twine that smells of the rain. And when those carts move, they leave something behind. Not just in the dust, but in the road itself. Deep grooves carved not by force, but by repetition. By trust. By the daily act of moving forward, even when there's no one watching, no clock ticking, no destination glamorous enough for photographs. Just one village to another. One morning to the next. The wheels don't rush. They don't need to. They whisper across the dry soil. A soft crunch of gravel. A murmur of stone under wheel. If you listen closely, it sounds like a language. An old one. The kind that doesn't use words but tells stories anyway. Children who grew up here know that sound before they know the alphabet. It's the music of home. The gravelly roll that begins just before dawn, when the mist is still brushing the tops of the fields and roosters are clearing their throats. That sound means someone's grandfather is on his way to market. It means a basket of guava might be coming to your kitchen soon. It means life is moving, slowly, yes, but always forward. There's a kind of sacredness in that slowness. We are taught to admire speed. We applaud the quickest route, the fastest delivery, the shortest wait. But on these roads, speed is useless. These roads do not reward haste. If you try to go too fast, they will jolt you. They will remind you, sometimes kindly, sometimes not, that the earth doesn't like to be rushed. And so the people here don't rush. They've learned the rhythm of patience. You see it in the way they wave to one another without urgency. In the way they sit on wooden stools, sipping tea so slowly it might last an hour. In the way the old women walk, with their baskets balanced on hips or heads. like dancers who know exactly where they're going and that they'll get there eventually. There is a lesson buried in the dust of these roads. It is not about efficiency. It is about presence. Because when you travel slowly, you see more. A crack in the bark of a tree that you never noticed. The way the light changes when the clouds shift. A bird's nest tucked under the eaves of a house you've passed 100 times but never really looked at. You also hear more. The rhythm of a distant bell. A child laughing somewhere past the bend. The sound of a cart. Again, that gentle, familiar rumble. That sound to some is nothing. But to those who grew up here, it's the sound of inheritance. Of continuity. Of belonging to a place that doesn't care how many likes you got or what you forgot to finish yesterday. It's the sound of now. And the roads themselves, well, they're storytellers too. Every rut and curve, every muddy patch and sun-baked stone, they've seen things. They've carried barefoot children, lovers walking side by side, neighbors with baskets of mangoes and worries. They've felt footsteps of joy, of sorrow, of routine. They've swallowed tears in silence, cradled laughter, held secrets. They don't speak of it, but you can feel it if you walk with them long enough. There's a corner near the edge of the old banyan tree where the road dips just slightly. Not enough to notice with your eyes, but enough for your feet to register the memory of 1,000 carts passing that same way. The tree, too, leans just a little toward the road, as if listening. As if watching all the journeys that come and go. At night, when the carts have gone and the village is hushed, the road sleeps. But not deeply. Remembers. And when morning comes again and that first cart groans into motion, the road stirs. It welcomes the familiar weight. The creak. The shuffle of hooves. It holds the wheel grooves like an old friend's palm holds the imprint of another. There's something holy about a road that holds history without shouting it. We pave over so much in our cities and our lives. We build new paths, new systems, new technologies, and yes, they serve us. But in doing so, we sometimes lose the things that were never meant to be fast. We forget how to listen to slow things. How to move in quiet rhythm with the earth. How to notice. But here on these dusty roads that knowledge remains. Not in books, not on signs, but in the simple act of a cart rolling by heavy and slow, carrying nothing more than bananas or firewood, or perhaps just the memory of yesterday. And as it passes, it leaves behind a sound. A whisper. A rhythm. A reminder that not all progress looks like speed. Sometimes it looks like stillness moving forward. The quiet roads we never thank. Dust doesn't fall like rain. It drifts, wavers, hesitates. It rises first, pulled upward by footsteps, wheels, or a sudden gust. And then, when it has nothing left to cling to, it begins its gentle descent. Layer by layer, it returns to the earth. And so, the dirt road wears its dust like an old coat, faded, familiar, and full of stories no one remembers to tell. These roads don't sparkle. They're not paved, polished, or painted with white lines. They don't lead to city centers and no one takes selfies on them. But they are always there, unshaken by the passing of years. Some curve gently between rice fields, others cut through groves of tall bamboo or meander behind quiet hills where buffalo still graze. They are not designed to impress, only to serve. And they do so, day after day without asking for applause. You see, these roads are the kind you walk on without thinking. Maybe it's early morning, and the sky is still undecided between blue and gold. Someone is carrying a basket of vegetables to the market. A child, barefoot, kicks a pebble all the way to school. Somewhere in the distance, an old motorcycle coughs to life, its sound breaking the silence like a rooster's call. And beneath all of it, under every journey, long or short, lies this simple stretch of earth pressed down by generations. There is no ceremony to a dirt road. It doesn't open with ribbon cuttings or speeches. It just begins, usually from the edge of someone's home or the place where one village ends and the fields begin. It's shaped not by machines but by repetition, by wheels turning, feet stepping, carts creaking. It follows the habits of people. It adapts. If the river overflows, the road shifts. If a new house is built, the path curves around it. In this way, the road is not only a path through space, but through time. To outsiders it might look unfinished, primitive even. But to the people who live alongside it, the road is a thread, one that stitches together the scattered pieces of daily life. It brings the grandmother to the temple. It leads the midwife to a neighbor's house in the middle of the night. It carries a wedding procession slowly, joyfully, under fluttering flags and drums. Remembers, even if we don't. And yet, how often do we notice it? How often do we stop to consider the weight this road quietly carries? Not just the sacks of rice or the loads of firewood, but the lives, the laughter, the arguments, the footsteps of loved ones who have come and gone. There are roads in some villages that know your name better than your neighbors do. They remember the sound of your father's bicycle, the rhythm of your mother's sandals, the slow, unsteady shuffle of your grandfather's cane. They remember how you used to run down them with a kite in your hand, screaming with delight at a wind that barely answered back. But roads don't speak. They don't complain when we forget them. And perhaps that's their quiet wisdom. We pave new roads. We build bridges. We install lights and traffic signs. And slowly these old dirt roads fade from our lives. Not because they've disappeared, but because we stop seeing them. We start taking the faster route. We forget the slower one ever mattered. But they are still there, often just a few steps beyond the main road. A little overgrown, a little rougher. Still passable. Still waiting. Like a childhood friend you lost touch with but never truly left behind. There's something humbling in that. The way these roads stay put. The way they ask nothing but give everything. They don't resist change, but they don't chase after it either. They exist in that soft space between memory and utility, between yesterday and today, where time doesn't race forward, it walks, slowly, thoughtfully, dust rising and falling like breath. If you ever find yourself walking down such a road, maybe at dusk when the light softens and shadows stretch long, you might notice something. Not with your eyes, perhaps, but with something deeper, a kind of recognition. As if the ground beneath you is not just ground, but a companion, a witness, a quiet echo of every person who has ever passed this way. And you'll realize that while some roads are meant to take us places, others are simply meant to remind us where we are, and where we've been. Not every road needs to lead to a city. Some lead to stillness, to a pause, to the quiet understanding that even the most ordinary parts of our lives, dirt roads, dusty shoes, silent mornings, are filled with meaning if only we choose to see it. So here's to the roads we don't post about, the ones we cross without thinking, the ones that carry the weight of our lives quietly, faithfully, one step at a time. May we walk them with more gratitude, and may we never forget to look down every now and then, and whisper a silent thanks. The first stones of progress. A quiet revolution beneath our feet. Long before empires marched with their armies and raised flags over new lands, and even before cities buzzed with trade and talk, something smaller, quieter, and perhaps even more significant was happening, one stone at a time. It began not with grandeur but with need. Imagine a village. Not a perfect one, not even particularly memorable in the grand sweep of history. Just a village where people woke up to roosters, cooked over fire, and talked in simple words under the shade of trees. A place where rain fell not on roofs of marble but on thatch and packed earth. A place where every path was a path because someone's feet had walked it first. And in that village, as the seasons turned and the rains came again and again, people noticed something. The paths were beginning to wear down. Not just from the water but from the use. The ground turned soft, then muddy, then impossible. Carts sank. Ankles twisted. The old carrying their firewood would pause, look at the ground, and sigh. No one called it a crisis. There were no decrees or councils or heralds sent to proclaim a solution. But someone, maybe a woman carrying vegetables, maybe a boy trailing after goats, picked up a flat rock and placed it in the wettest patch of earth. Just to make it easier the next time. It wasn't planned. It wasn't an invention. It was simply helpful. Then someone else did the same. Then another. Not every day. Not with ceremony. But with intent. These were not polished stones or carved tiles. No one smoothed their edges or set them in mortar. They were chosen because they were close by, picked from the river, gathered from the hillsides where the wind had already done most of the shaping. They were brought back in baskets or on backs, placed with hands that also planted crops and braided rope. No engineers drew blueprints. No historians took notes. But the stones went down and the path began to change. At first it was just one spot in the village, the short stretch from the well to the communal cooking space. Then the narrow slope where elders often slipped on their way to the temple tree. Then the curve around the goat pen that flooded each monsoon. No one called it infrastructure. No one thought they were laying the groundwork for civilization. But they were. Because the moment people started shaping the earth to make life easier for everyone, not just themselves, they crossed a line in our evolution that no tool or weapon had yet defined. This wasn't the triumph of steel or the mystery of fire. It was something more tender. A decision made over and over again, to bring a stone from there to here. To make the road just a little kinder. You might be tempted to call them primitive roads. But that word, primitive, misses something important. These weren't careless or crude. They were rooted in attention. Someone had to know which parts of the ground stayed driest. Someone had to remember which rocks wouldn't slip when it rained. Someone had to walk back and forth, noticing what helped and what didn't. They weren't building roads the way kings do. They were weaving something much softer, a sense of belonging, a quiet kind of progress. And what's more, they didn't do it for glory. No one carved their name into a stone. No one asked to be remembered. The reward was immediate and modest. A walk that didn't hurt, a wheel that didn't stick, a step that felt solid beneath a tired foot. We often measure progress in tall monuments or glittering cities. But those first few stones tell a different story. They remind us that the path to advancement isn't always paved in ambition. Sometimes it's laid down in patience, in empathy, in the simple act of making something better even if no one notices. Years passed, then generations. Children who once played near those stones grew up with them underfoot, forgetting they were ever new. Visitors from neighboring villages saw the paths and began placing stones of their own back home. The idea traveled not by conquest but by curiosity. Not through orders but through imitation. A mother saw how dry her cousin's village stayed and brought the idea home. A traveling potter noticed how his cart rolled easier, and when he settled down he taught his neighbors the trick. And slowly, without fanfare, the world began to change. Later, of course, the great roads would come, the long, straight ones built by empires who wanted to move soldiers and goods at impressive speed. Those roads had budgets and blueprints. They were feats of power and pride. But they stood on the backs, on the stones, of those quiet paths that came before. It's easy to forget that. History books do. They jumped straight to Rome, to Mesopotamia, to the royal engineers of ancient China. But I like to think of those unknown villagers. I like to picture their hands, rough, maybe blistered, setting down a stone because it just made sense. They weren't looking to shape the future. They were just trying to make it through the day. And in doing so, they made the future possible. So the next time you walk down a paved road or a quiet garden path, pause. Look down. Not just at the stones, but at what they represent. They are more than rock. They are memory of a time when progress was measured not in speed or size, but in softness, in care. A time when evolution wasn't loud, but lived quietly beneath our feet. And maybe, just maybe, it still does. The Quiet Builder. A story about hands, stone, and time. He doesn't rush. That's the first thing you notice if you stand long enough to watch him work. The world might be spinning faster by the hour, cars honking just past the hill, notifications buzzing in pockets nearby. But here, in the hush of the half-built path, time seems to gather itself differently. It folds in around him like an old coat, familiar and slow. The man crouches low, his fingers tracing the soil like a musician reading old sheet music. A slight twist of his wrist, a pinch of dust between his thumb and forefinger. Then he reaches for a stone, not any stone but that one, the one his eyes had quietly chosen 3 steps ago. Flat enough to rest without wobble, broad enough to take a boot's weight, and humble enough not to draw attention. He turns it over once, twice. It fits in his palms like something remembered. Then, gently, almost ceremoniously, he lowers it into place. A faint tap. The wooden mallet, scarred with years and quiet with use, meets the stone with a sound barely louder than a heartbeat. Then again. He's not striking the rock into submission. No, he's persuading it, asking it softly to belong. You might think he's just laying a path. But that's only the surface. Look closer and you'll see he's negotiating with the earth, listening to what it will accept and what it won't. The soil isn't just dirt to him, it's a foundation that deserves respect. Every tap of the mallet is a conversation. Will you hold this? Can you carry this weight? Is this where it fits? And the stones, too, they're not just pieces of the puzzle. They carry memory in their cracks. Some still wear the scent of mountain rain. Others have been scorched by sun, scratched by centuries, waiting for a second life. And now they are chosen. Not for perfection but for how they carry their imperfections well. He has no blueprint. No printed map. Just instinct, muscle memory, and a quiet trust in his own eye. It's a trust earned not from books or lessons, but from years spent on his knees, whispering to the earth with his tools. His fingers know the difference between a stone that will wobble and one that will rest with certainty. His ears hear music in the rhythm of alignment. Pause. Shuffle. It's almost a ritual. Children have passed him by, asking why he doesn't use machines. There's faster ways, they shout, riding bicycles, laughter trailing behind. And he always smiles, never answering. Because how could he explain? How do you tell someone that speed isn't always the point? He knows what quick work looks like. He's seen it, gravel poured without care, cement thrown down like a bandage. Walkways that crumble before the season changes. Things built without attention, without presence. There is no pride in that. No, what he's building is not just a path. It's a promise. A promise that some things are worth doing slowly. That care still matters. That the hands can teach the mind about patience if given the chance. Around him, the air is filled with sounds most people don't hear anymore. The scrape of stone against stone. The hush of soil being moved aside. The sigh of a man straightening his back, bones crackling gently like old floorboards. And that tap-tap rhythm, soft and certain, steady as a metronome. Hours pass. He drinks water from a dented tin flask, wipes his brow with a faded cloth, then bends down again. His hands are thick, browned by sun and soil, calloused like tree bark. But they move with surprising tenderness. They cradle the stones. They speak fluently in pressure, angle, and trust. Behind him, a line of stones stretches backward like a quiet legacy. Uneven not in design but in personality. Each one holding its own little story fitted just right, not forced. It's not symmetry he's after, it's cohesion. Harmony. Like a choir of different voices, singing the same hymn. He knows that no one will remember the exact order of the stones. They will walk this path with groceries, with worries, with bare feet or winter boots. They'll notice how solid it feels. How it doesn't shift beneath them. How, strangely, it feels right underfoot. They might never wonder why. But he will know. Because every placement was a decision. Every stone was asked permission. Every inch of this path was built not just with tools, but with presence. With a kind of quiet love most people no longer have the time for. You could say he's just a man laying stones. But you'd be missing the point. He's a keeper of the slow craft. A guardian of things done well even if no one watches. A builder of paths that carry the weight of lives, silently, reliably, without asking for thanks. And as the sun tilts toward the west, staining the stones with gold, he places another one down. Not quickly. Not carelessly. Just right. He lifts the mallet. The stone path no one noticed. It didn't appear all at once. No loud announcement. No dramatic moment of arrival. At first, it was just a patch of dirt, dusty, uneven, scattered with dry leaves and the occasional stubborn weed. People passed over it with little thought. Children ran, shoes pounding the earth in playful chaos. The elderly took careful, measured steps. And still the ground bore every footfall without complaint. But one day, no one remembers exactly when, someone placed the first stone. Not a grand stone. Not marble, not cut to perfection. Just an ordinary, flat slab, the kind you might find lying beside a riverbank or behind an old shed. Someone picked it up, turned it over in their hands and placed it down with care. Not because they had a plan, but because it felt right. Then another stone was laid. And another. Each one nestled close to the next like old friends sitting shoulder to shoulder. There was no blueprint. No committee. No rush. Just hands that quietly shaped the ground, one day at a time. Soon there was a path. It wasn't straight. It curved, just slightly, enough to suggest it had learned to follow the land instead of fighting it. The stones weren't all the same color. Some carried the dull gray of age. Others held the quiet warmth of sun-baked earth. A few bore tiny fossil patterns, shells, ferns, forgotten creatures from forgotten times. They didn't match, and that's what made them beautiful. Rain came as it always does. At first, it washed over the stones, rushing through the gaps like a child weaving between legs in a crowd. The water didn't ask permission, it simply went where it was allowed to go. It filled the tiny cracks, whispered into the crevices and vanished slowly, drop by drop. In time moss came. Not in a rush, moss never hurries. It appeared like a memory that drifts back when you least expect it. Soft, green and slightly damp to the touch. It clung to the edges of the stones, then began to stretch across their surfaces as if trying to keep them warm. Some people might have called it decay. But those who paid attention saw something else, a kind of quiet dignity. The moss gave the stones a story. It said, I have been here a while. I've seen things. I've stayed. And the stones, they didn't argue. They simply kept doing what they were meant to do. Carry weight, stay grounded, hold the road together. People kept walking that path. Some of them noticed the stones beneath their feet. Most did not. But it didn't matter to the path. It had found its purpose. It's strange, isn't it? How something so ordinary can become something sacred, if you let it speak. And that path, worn smooth in places by time and use, became more than a way from one place to another. It became a kind of companion. It didn't interrupt, didn't demand. It simply offered itself, stone by stone, as a reminder that things built with quiet care can outlast even our loudest intentions. No one ever really talks about the strength of what grows slowly. We live in a world that celebrates speed, the quick fix, the instant success. But this path, this quiet line of stone and moss, suggests another way, a slower one. It tells us that resilience doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the silent pressure of one stone resting on another, the persistence of moss that returns each year, the way rainwater seeps into cracks and shapes the earth without violence. The path doesn't need attention. It doesn't perform. It simply is. And because of that, it becomes something enduring. You see, it's easy to miss the significance of what stays. We're trained to look for what changes, what moves, what dazzles. But there is something deeply human about the desire to build a path, even a small one, to lay down a foundation that others might use, to take a rough piece of stone and place it where it belongs. Not for applause, not even for recognition, just for the sake of making the way a little better. This kind of work, the quiet kind, often goes unseen. But it's the very thing that holds everything together. One afternoon a child stopped on that path. He crouched, touched the stone with one finger, and asked his grandfather, "Who put all these here?" The old man smiled. "No one really." "And everyone." The child frowned. That doesn't make sense. But it did. Because the truth is, paths like these are never built by just one person. They are shaped by the accumulation of small decisions. A hand choosing to lift rather than leave. A heart deciding to care even when no one else is watching. Feet that return again and again until a trail becomes a road. And in that way the path becomes a mirror. It reflects not just where we're going, but how we choose to move forward. Years from now, when the moss has grown thicker and the stones have settled deeper into the earth, people will still walk this way. Their feet will find comfort in the firmness of what lies beneath them, even if they don't stop to notice. Even if they forget who placed the stones. But the path won't mind. It was never about being remembered. It was about being useful. Being solid. Being there. A quiet upgrade to the ordinary rhythm of life. Not with noise. Not with grandeur. But with presence. So next time you see a path, a real one or one that exists only in your life, consider what it's made of. Not just stone, but choice, patience, and the beauty of what holds firm when everything else moves on. That, perhaps, is the real miracle. Not the path itself, but the simple fact that someone once cared enough to begin it, and someone else kept it going. Whispers beneath the stones. A reflection on the quiet legacy of old road. They don't shout. These roads, they don't announce themselves with flashing lights or grand arches. They don't beg to be noticed. Instead they lie still, quiet, firm, waiting. If you pass them by too quickly, you might not even look twice. A stretch of old stone beneath your feet, gray and worn and easily missed. But slow down just a little, and the ground begins to hum. Long before modern highways roared to life with engines and honking horns, there were paths of stone, laid by hands no one remembers. These hands didn't work for fame. They didn't carve their names into marble or build statues of themselves. What they built was different. Something meant not to impress but to endure. In a world where even the tallest buildings crumble eventually, these stone roads were a kind of quiet rebellion against time. You'll find them winding through hills, crossing creeks, skirting forests and fields, threading their way between towns that have changed names, languages, and faces more than once. Some of these roads are still used, patched here and there, curved a little differently with each repair, but the bones remain the same. and the bones are stone. Each slab was laid with thought, not randomly, not rushed. These builders understood something we often forget, that what carries people matters just as much as where they're going. So the stones were placed side by side, sometimes with a subtle rise in the center to help rainwater run off, sometimes with a pattern of interlocking shapes that resisted the pull of time. These details weren't for decoration, they were for survival. Walk on these roads today, and you'll feel something underfoot that's hard to name. It's not just history. It's not nostalgia. It's deeper. It's the weight of countless footsteps that came before you. There's a particular kind of smoothness that only time can create. The surface of the stones isn't sharp anymore. They've been polished not by machines or polish but by living, by boots and hooves and wheels and sandals, by people going to market, by children walking to school, by soldiers marching and lovers stealing away in the night. The stones remember them all. You can almost hear the echoes if you listen. Not loud, not clear. Just the soft scrape of leather soles. The hush of wagon wheels on wet stone. The laughter of two teenagers chasing each other home before the rain starts. The quiet click of a cane as an old man makes his way to the edge of the village, where the trees open up and the world feels wide again. Every groove in the stone is a line from an unwritten diary. Every dip in the path is a pause in a story you'll never fully know. It's easy to forget that these roads were once new. That once someone stood at the edge of a muddy trail and thought, "We can do better." And then they did. Not with speeches or slogans but with shovels, chisels, sweat, and quiet hope. They didn't build these roads to be admired. They built them so that people could find each other more easily. So that a letter could reach its destination. So that a mother could visit her sister in the next village without getting stuck in the rain-soaked dirt. There's something beautiful about that kind of intention. Something humble. Something human. In a way, these roads became more than just passageways. They became a kind of memory. A soft archive of movement, connection, and persistence. Even now, centuries later, when modernity has paved over much of the past, you can still stumble across stretches of these old paths. Sometimes hidden in a forest, half swallowed by roots and moss. Sometimes in plain sight, running beside a sleek asphalt highway like an elderly companion. Slower, quieter, but still here. And when you do find them, you can't help but feel grounded. Not just physically but emotionally too. Because there's something comforting about touching something that has lasted. Something that has carried the weight of lives and kept going. We live in a world obsessed with speed and change. We replace things quickly, often before they're truly broken. But these roads ask a different question. What if the goal isn't to move fast but to move well? What if it's not about getting there first but about making the journey matter? We often measure history by wars and kings, inventions and revolutions. But maybe there's another kind of history worth honoring, the kind that sits quietly under our feet. The kind made not of glory but of grit. These stones didn't win battles, but they carried those who fought in them. They didn't spark revolutions but they helped spread ideas. They weren't designed to amaze but to endure. And in doing so, they've become something close to sacred. So next time you find yourself on an old stone path, stop. Feel the texture beneath your soles. Run your hand along the edge of a weathered slab. And listen. Not for noise but for presence. Because beneath the silence, the stones are still speaking. Not in words but in patience. In steadiness. In the simple miracle of still being here. They remind us that not everything precious needs to be loud. That not all stories need to be told in full to be felt. And that sometimes, the most powerful legacy you can leave behind, is simply a path that others can walk. The quiet work beneath our feet. It's easy to overlook the little things that keep the world in motion. We walk down the street, distracted by a buzzing phone or a thought lingering from the morning news, and we rarely pause to notice the path beneath our shoes. Yet, tucked along the edge of every road, there's something humble, something quietly dutiful. A narrow trench, a shallow groove patiently guiding rainwater away, never seeking thanks. They call them drainage ditches. But really they're more like the unsung librarians of the street, organizing the chaos of storms, keeping the deluge in check, ensuring that water knows exactly where to go and where not to linger. On rainy days, when the skies open and the streets darken with glistening sheen, these little rivulets come alive, not with fanfare, not with a roar, but with a steady, deliberate flow. There's something oddly graceful about the way the water glides through these channels. It doesn't crash or complain. It doesn't boast of its role in preserving the integrity of the asphalt. It simply moves, gentle, measured, calm. You'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. But it's there every time, carrying away what shouldn't stay, protecting the road that carries so many lives forward. We often think of roads as purely practical things, concrete ribbons laid down for cars and buses, for trucks and motorbikes. But that's only part of the story. Roads are, in many ways, the quiet arteries of civilization. They do not shout. They do not flash. But without them nothing flows. Not food, not help, not dreams. A road may not be the destination, but it is always part of the journey. Somewhere just before dawn, a baker's van hums down a narrow backstreet, bringing warm loaves to a sleepy neighborhood. A few hours later, a child walks that same path to school, her backpack bouncing gently with every step. And later still, an old man leans on his cane, following the sidewalk home from the park. They may never meet, these three. But the road knows them all. It holds their footprints, their wheels, their quiet rituals of daily life. And underneath it all, beneath the tires and boots, beneath the chatter and rush, there's that thin line of water still moving in the trench, still doing its job. We don't speak often of infrastructure. It's not glamorous. There are no awards for a properly sloped drainage system, no morning talk shows discussing curb gradients or asphalt mixes. But there is a kind of poetry in the practical. The way form meets function. The way design whispers instead of shouts. These grooves and slopes, these calculated angles, are part of a larger philosophy, that real strength is built in silence and real beauty lies in usefulness. Think about it, the road doesn't ask us to notice it. It doesn't need to be applauded for being level or smooth or solid. And yet, when it fails, when a pothole appears or when water floods a curve we once trusted, it demands our attention at once. Perhaps that's the nature of quiet things. We only notice them when they stop being quiet. But maybe that's why we should notice more. Next time you walk down a street, look to the side. See the thin trail of water, carving its way along the edge, obedient to gravity, loyal to its mission. Think about how it doesn't resist the road, it respects it. It doesn't demand space, it borrows it. That little stream is part of a pact, an agreement between nature and design. It speaks of balance, of cooperation, of thoughtfulness laid down in concrete. And what of the people who built this system? The engineers who calculated runoff rates, the workers who molded the concrete with aching backs and weathered hands? Do we remember them? Do we imagine their effort when we speed by, late for a meeting? Probably not. But their legacy endures in every smooth ride, every dry sidewalk, every day we move safely through a storm. The road is not a stage. It doesn't perform for us. But it is a kind of silent ceremony every day, a ritual of connection, of movement, of passage. It carries more than people. It carries histories. It carries reunions, departures, first steps and last rides. It carries the tired, the hopeful, the lost, the found. And it does so with the kind of humility that deserves our respect. So much of life today is loud, opinions, alerts, demands. But the road teaches a quieter kind of wisdom. It teaches that strength doesn't need spectacle, that purpose doesn't need applause, and that the most vital systems in our world often live in the background, asking for nothing but to be allowed to function. A drainage ditch curving gently alongside a neighborhood lane may not seem like much, but in its simplicity lies a kind of grace. It is a reminder that care doesn't always come in dramatic gestures. Sometimes it comes in the form of water that does not flood your home, in the way a road does not crack under pressure, in the way our world keeps moving not because someone shouted but because someone planned carefully, long before the storm arrived. And maybe, in seeing that, we begin to understand our own lives a little better. That what holds us together is often not the grand moments, but the quiet structures we forget to notice. The friendships that show up without needing to be asked. The habits that sustain us. The boundaries we draw to keep our inner roads clear. In the end, a road is just a path. But how we build it, and how we care for it, can say a lot about who we are. So let the water flow. Let it slip silently along the curb, doing its work just out of view. And let us, in our own ways, do the same, holding steady, staying open, quietly connecting one another in the simplest, strongest ways. The silent witnesses of the old road. It begins quietly as most enduring things do. There is a path, narrow, uneven, its stones worn smooth in places by the tread of countless feet. It does not shout its presence, nor demand attention. It simply is the way old things often are. A little road, laid with cobbles that do not gleam but have settled into the earth like memory itself, not flashy or dramatic, but persistent. You may not notice it at first, but it remembers you long after your steps have moved on. Beside this road grow trees. Not just any trees, these are the elders of the land. Their trunks are thick and gnarled, the kind that do not bow to storms but absorb them. Their bark is a patchwork of age, rough like dry riverbeds, or scarred like parchment that's been handled by time's patient hand. These trees do not rise from soil like mere decoration. No, they emerge from the ground with the quiet gravity of something that belongs. Their roots snake into the cracks between the stones, weaving not to disrupt but to hold. They do not ask the path to move, nor does the path push back. It is a kind of ancient truce. The roots grow deep, clutching the earth and stone as if they know the story must be preserved. One strand at a time, like the stitching in an old tapestry. And in that stillness, if you pause, if you listen, there is something alive. Not in the way birds sing or winds rustle, but in the way memory hums beneath silence. These trees, they have seen. They have watched the seasons spin their slow wheel for centuries. Watched as summer gold softened into autumn's fire, and frost etched its breath into every leaf and stone. They've held their breath through lightning strikes, stood still while wars passed like storms, and exhaled slowly again when peace returned. They remember the feet of travelers, bare, booted, hurrying or hesitant. Some trudged with burdens heavy as silence. Others danced, believing the world was still new. These trees heard voices, of merchants, lovers, children, soldiers. They heard laughter, weeping, bargaining, praying. The stones underfoot caught the rhythm of their days, while the roots overhead listened and kept the secrets. No monument marks their presence. But make no mistake, they are monuments nonetheless. Not built but grown. And the road is not just a route. It is a record. There is no drama to its existence. No sudden turn, no grand flourish. It does not twist in rebellion or stretch in ambition. It continues, unfazed, unworried, an unfurling line of purpose. Where it goes is less important than how it stays. There's a certain nobility in that. In being there. In holding your shape while everything else changes. In the modern world, where speed is currency and novelty is king, such a road might seem outdated, an antique. But look closer. Look with eyes that aren't distracted by noise. This road doesn't just survive, it anchors. It is the quiet floor beneath the theater of history, the stage on which generations have come and gone, loved and lost, risen and fallen. It held firm beneath boots and hooves, beneath wheels made of wood and later rubber, beneath the weight of empires and the lightness of springtime walks. Perhaps you've walked a road like this before. Perhaps you were too hurried to notice. But if you paused even briefly, if your steps slowed and your breath softened, you might have felt it, that low humming pulse of continuity. Not nostalgia, no. Something quieter, more exacting. The presence of something that has been waiting. Because this road and these trees, they do not chase progress. They do not rush to meet the future. Instead, they offer something rarer, the gift of remaining. And in doing so, they remind us that permanence is not made of concrete or glass or steel. It is made of patience, of rhythm, of being deeply rooted and quietly useful. That kind of permanence doesn't announce itself, just holds. Imagine the countless footsteps this path has absorbed, not just the famous or powerful but the ordinary. A mother carrying firewood, a boy chasing a dog, a man returning home too late. All these small stories passed like whispers across its stones, and the path listened. It always listens. Now perhaps it listens to you. If you sit beneath one of those trees and rest your hand against its bark, you'll find it cool and textured as though time itself left fingerprints. If you trace the cracks in the stone beneath your feet, you'll notice how no two breaks are alike. The roots that creep through them are not intrusions. They are invitations. A reminder that history is not a thing that happened but a thing that continues. In the presence of such a place you cannot help but slow down. Your pace, your thoughts, even your pulse seems to adjust. And something inside begins to shift. You remember things you didn't know you'd forgotten, like how stillness can feel like safety. How the weight of years can feel like a blanket, not a burden. This path won't take you anywhere grand. It leads to no palace or shrine. But in walking it, you may arrive somewhere more important. A place where change no longer feels like chaos, where time feels less like a thief and more like a sculptor. Here, in the company of roots and stone, you understand, some things are meant to endure not because they resist change but because they absorb it. So let others chase speed. Let others redraw maps and pave over what came before. But not here. Here the road stays. The trees stay. Not because they are stuck in the past, but because they are holding the past, gently, wisely, and offering it to the present. And maybe, if we are wise enough to walk slowly, to notice, to listen, we can carry that steadiness with us. Like a stone in the shoe, yes, but also like a compass in the hand. After all, not every path needs to be new to take you somewhere that matters. The soft persistence of time. There's a road I used to walk every day as a child. It wasn't famous or particularly pretty, just a narrow stone path that ran behind my grandmother's house, snaking its way through a cluster of trees and out toward the fields. The stones that made up that path were heavy and uneven, gray with patches of darker slate where the sun never reached. When I was younger, I used to think those stones would last forever, that they had always been there and always would be. Solid things tend to fool us like that. But now, years later, when I visit again, I notice something else. The edges of the stones have softened. Not in a dramatic way, not like something broken or ruined, but gently, like a memory fading at the corners. Along the cracks, green threads of moss have appeared, inching forward like quiet travelers. The moss isn't loud about its presence. It doesn't claw or climb like ivy. Instead it settles in. Patient. Persistent. It lies flat and spreads wide as if wrapping the stone in a soft sigh. There is no single moment when the road changed. I couldn't tell you the day the first crack appeared, or when the moss took root. It's not that kind of transformation. It's the kind that happens slowly in small, invisible increments. A leaf falls. A rain comes. The wind passes. And something shifts. Then again the next day. And again. That's how time works, I suppose, not in grand gestures but in quiet repetition. I remember how, after the rain, little puddles would form between the stones. Not deep enough to drown in, but enough to reflect the sky for a moment before the sun came and dried them away. There was something almost ceremonial in how the water arrived and departed, an endless cycle of arrival and departure, presence and absence. If you watched long enough, you'd start to see a rhythm in it. The kind of rhythm that doesn't ask for attention but rewards those who notice. Some might say the road is being ruined. That the moss is a sign of neglect. That the erosion is a kind of failure. But I'm not so sure. I think the road is doing what all things do when they've lived long enough. It's becoming something else. Not less. Just different. There's a certain dignity in that. We live in a world that prizes permanence. We build highways and bridges, cities and statues, all with the hope they'll outlast us. We seal things in concrete. We lay steel beams like declarations. We call it progress. We call it legacy. But maybe we've misunderstood what it means to last. Maybe it's not about resisting time but learning how to move with it. The moss understands this. So do the puddles. So does the road, now softened and worn but still there, still carrying footsteps, still holding stories in its cracks. There's a kind of wisdom in things that know how to age without trying to fight it. They don't rage against the years. They don't demand to be noticed. They simply endure, quietly, gracefully. If you crouch down close to the stones, you can sometimes see tiny trails carved by running water. Just thin, pale lines, almost invisible. Rainwater finds its way through everything. It doesn't need force, it only needs time. That's the lesson, I think. Given enough time, even something as soft as water can shape stone. It's easy to overlook these small truths in a world always in a hurry. We rush past old roads. We tear them up to make room for newer, smoother ones. But the old roads remember things. They remember footsteps and seasons and the weight of silence. They remember the first frost of each winter, and the hot breath of summer rising from their surface. They remember laughter, and tears, and all the quiet in between. Time, I've come to realize, isn't an enemy. It's not something we need to conquer. It's a companion, unseen, yes, and often unwelcome, but a companion nonetheless. It walks with us. It leaves its fingerprints on everything we touch. And in doing so, it tells us we are not separate from the world, but part of its constant unfolding. There's an old saying that nothing gold can stay. But maybe that's not a reason to grieve. Maybe it's a reminder to look more closely, to see the gold while it's here, to notice the shimmer before it fades, to walk the old road not in mourning for what it once was, but in gratitude for what it still is. The moss will continue to spread. The stones will continue to soften. And one day perhaps the path will disappear entirely beneath a blanket of green. But it will not be gone. It will simply have changed. Like everything does. That's the quiet truth beneath all things that endure. Not the promise that they will never change, but that they will know how to change beautifully. Whispers of the Forgotten Path. By request. It began with the leaves. Not in a rush, not all at once, but gently. As if they had been waiting for the right moment. High in the branches where they once shimmered in the sun, they slowly loosened their hold. One by one they let go. They didn't fall. Falling is too harsh a word. No, they floated. Danced even, in slow spirals caught in the invisible breath of the wind. Some twirled lazily, brushing against others like they were whispering farewells. Some drifted down with purpose, landing silently on the old road below. The road was not what it used to be. Once it had purpose. Boots had worn its stones smooth. Wheels had rattled across its surface. Voices had echoed through its bends, loud with life, with laughter, with longing. But that was long ago. People had stopped coming. The road hadn't been closed, not officially. It had simply been left behind. Forgotten not by force but by habit. Like an old friend you mean to call but never quite do. Now the only footsteps came from deer. Or from foxes, their paws leaving soft prints in the dust. Once in a while, a bird would hop across it, curious but unconcerned. The stones no longer felt the weight of purpose. They only felt the quiet. The leaves gathered slowly at the edges of the road, little clusters of memory. Then came the wind, playful and patient. It teased the piles apart, scattering the brittle fragments into the air. Some were lifted high and disappeared into the woods. Others tumbled along the surface, like children rolling down a hill. They had no destination, only motion. Time passed, though you could no longer measure it with clocks. Not here. The rhythm of the place had shifted to something older, something softer. Rain didn't just fall, it soaked into everything. Into the soil, into the stone, into the silence. Sunlight didn't just shine, it filtered through branches like gold sifted through a sieve. And then, as if the earth had decided the road needed dressing, something remarkable began to happen. At first it was just a few stubborn blades of grass. They pushed up between the cracks, testing the space like fingers reaching through an old shirt sleeve. They didn't ask permission. They didn't wait for approval. They simply grew, small, green testaments to time's quiet insistence. Soon moss crept in, softening the harshness of the stones. The cracks widened and the green thickened. Wildflowers appeared, here and there, yellow, violet, white, as if painting forgotten beauty back into the lines of the earth. Even saplings began to show themselves. Not many and not tall, yet. But they stood with a kind of quiet pride, their tiny leaves trembling with each breeze, their roots tasting the old path beneath them. They weren't in a hurry. They knew they had time. It was strange, really, how life returned not with noise but with silence. No trumpets. No announcements. Just the slow, steady reclaiming of space. And the road didn't resist. It seemed to sigh in relief as though it had carried the weight of memory for too long. The stones, no longer burdened by footsteps, began to crumble. Edges softened. Lines blurred. What was once clearly a road began to feel more like a suggestion, a trace of something once useful, now tenderly dissolving into the land. Sometimes on quiet days if you walked there, and some still did now and then, you could feel it. That tension between what was and what is. The past lingered but not like a ghost. More like a shadow, gentle, not haunting. There was something humbling in watching the earth take back what had once been carved from it. The road had been made by hands, tools, intent. And yet those things meant little now. Not against the patient breath of time. Not against the simple will of a seed, a root, a raindrop. Every vine that reached across the stones seemed to write a poem in slow motion. Every branch that arched overhead rewrote the shape of the sky. What had been straight was now curved. What had been certain was now soft. No one knew exactly when the road had stopped being a road. There had been no ceremony. No final traveler. It had faded the way music fades when the song ends and no one presses replay. But that didn't mean it was gone. It had become something else. A pathway for deer. A playground for squirrels. A stage for sunlight. A canvas for moss. And perhaps if you stood still enough, you might hear it. The rustle of grass, the hush of wind through sapling leaves, the scratch of a bird's claw on stone. Each sound a note in an unending lullaby. not of loss but of change, of turning. After all, nothing lasts forever, not even the roads we build, especially not the ones we forget. But maybe that's all right, because even in forgetting, there is transformation. Even in absence there is return. The leaves will fall, the wind will carry them, and the earth, quietly, patiently, will begin again. The quiet endurance of a road, a story of persistence and stillness. It begins with nothing more than a trace, perhaps just the flattening of grass beneath cautious feet, or the subtle curve where the earth wears away under the repetition of passage. Long before it becomes a road, a path is born out of movement, out of need, out of the simple human act of going from one place to another. There is no ceremony when a road is made, no applause, no witness but the sky and the trees. It grows inch by inch, not from blueprints or grand declarations, but from footsteps, some hesitant, others heavy, many forgotten. A child runs barefoot toward the river. An old man walks slowly to the market. A woman carries firewood on her back. Over time, the land softens beneath them and a path begins to breathe. The strength of a road, if it can be called strength at all, is not in concrete or stone. It is not in how straight it runs or how smooth it feels under tires. Its endurance is quieter than that, less dramatic. It lies in its ability to stay, to keep existing, even when it is no longer the center of anyone's attention. Some roads lose their travelers. A new highway is built. A bridge collapses. A village empties out. And yet, the road doesn't protest. It doesn't disappear overnight. It lingers. Grass may grow over its edges. Trees may arch above it like caretakers. But the road remains, a subtle indentation in the earth's memory, a wrinkle in the fabric of time. To say that a road is resilient might make it sound heroic. But the truth is more modest. The road does not fight to survive. It does not resist change. It simply absorbs it. It shifts with the land when rains come and carve rivulets across its spine. It cracks when roots push through from below, but those cracks become part of its story. It bends if it must, narrows if no one comes, but rarely does it vanish completely. Like an old photograph left in the sun, it may fade but it doesn't forget. And when people return, years or decades later, they often find the road still there. Maybe less visible, maybe a bit more wild, but recognizable, familiar. Like an old friend who doesn't ask where you've been, just walks beside you again as if no time had passed at all. There is something deeply human about the way roads persist. Not because they are made by us, but because they behave like us. We too adapt more than we conquer. We shift, we endure, we carry our stories in our bodies, some of them visible, many more buried beneath the surface. A road is a record of motion, of repetition, of return. It bears the weight of the mundane and the sacred alike. Pilgrimages and commutes, escapes and homecomings, joyous arrivals and tearful departures. All of it held within the same compact stretch of earth. And yet it does not shout its history. It does not mark its moments in marble. A road remembers silently. That is perhaps what makes it so rare in a world addicted to noise. Its presence is not loud but unwavering. It does not ask to be noticed. It does not need to be named. Even when the world around it changes, when forests turn into cities, when borders shift, when time erodes the things people once thought permanent, the road remains, adjusting in quiet ways. Sometimes that means disappearing beneath layers of asphalt, becoming part of a newer path. Other times, it means slowly reclaiming its original form, as nature gently wears away the marks of human intention. And whether it is paved and polished or cracked and forgotten, the road still connects. It links what was with what is. It reminds us that movement once happened here, that someone sometime believed this direction mattered. In that way, a road is never truly abandoned. Even if no one walks it for 100 years, it holds its place in the landscape like a promise kept in secret. Like a whisper from the past saying, I was here. And I mattered. There's no need for monuments when a road is doing its quiet work. It has no interest in glory. Its value isn't in its visibility but in its function, its form, its gentle willingness to serve. It doesn't care whether it is admired. Its worth is not tied to attention. That, perhaps, is its greatest lesson. We are taught to believe that only what is seen is real, that only what is praised has value. But the road teaches something different. It teaches that meaning can exist without spectacle, that constancy can outlast applause, that the most important presences are often the ones that simply stay. There's an old road not far from my grandfather's village. It cuts through a field where wildflowers grow now, unbothered and bright. The stones are scattered, the way uneven. But when I walk there, I can feel the pulse of lives long gone. The echoes of wagons, the shuffle of sandals, the hushed conversations under starlight. Nothing remains, and yet, everything remains. That road is not a relic. It is not a ruin. It is a witness. Quiet. Enduring. Oh. And in a world that so often confuses loudness with importance, the road reminds us of the strength of simply being. Of being useful without being recognized. Of adapting without being broken. Of lasting not because you refuse to change, but because you know how to bend without vanishing. So here's to the roads, both the ones made of earth and gravel and the ones we carry inside us. The invisible paths shaped by years of choices, the habits that keep us grounded, the beliefs we return to when all else is uncertain. They may not gleam. They may not shout. But they are there. And they are enough. When the streets remember. When the sun finally slips behind the horizon and the last of the daylight sighs its goodbye, the city exhales. It's not a sound you hear with your ears. It's more of a quiet shift, like the way your shoulders drop when no one is watching, or the way your breath slows when you realize there's nowhere left to be. The day has folded itself neatly away, and in its place, night begins to unravel. Street by street, the world changes costume. The clamor of footsteps fades, the chatter of lives being lived grows faint, and what's left behind is silence. Not the empty kind, but a silence rich with memory. A silence that knows things. And under the soft breath of the moon, the roads begin to speak. They don't raise their voices. They don't need to. Their stories are etched in every crack, every uneven tile, every weathered curb that has known more than one lifetime. You wouldn't think to listen at first. To most, they are just roads, functional, dirty, forgettable. But if you stay long enough, if you stand still while the world sleeps, you might hear it too. There's a narrow lane near the edge of the old district. By day, it's choked with motorbikes, school children, and the smell of frying oil from a street vendor's cart. But by night, it becomes something else entirely. The light shifts. The shadows stretch longer. The moonlight, thin and silver, slides across the surface of cobblestones, revealing the quiet dignity of things that have endured. Those stones, have you ever looked closely? Each one has been pressed by the soles of those long gone. Sandals worn thin by decades of walking. Bare feet chasing laughter. Boots that marched with purpose or maybe with dread. High heels clicking nervously on the way to a first date. Slippers shuffling in the early morning, holding grief or fatigue or both. The street never forgets. It remembers the day a child dropped her red ribbon and didn't notice. It fluttered for a moment, caught in a breeze, and then vanished into a gutter. It remembers a man who stood motionless in the rain, his umbrella folded at his side, letting the storm soak his shirt as though he needed it to prove something. It remembers a bicycle with a basket full of flowers and a girl who sang under her breath as she pedaled slowly, as if in no hurry to arrive. Streets do not mourn, not in the way we do, but they bear witness. And in that witnessing, there is a kind of grace. The road outside the train station is wide and loud by day. But once the last train pulls away, there's a hush. Only the echoes remain, the dragging of suitcases, the rush of reunions, the strained goodbyes. Even silence feels different there. It carries the weight of parting, of people who stepped into unknown chapters, not knowing when, or if, they'd return. There's a corner where two streets cross like old friends. The lamppost there flickers, though no one ever fixes it. It's become part of the scenery, its irregular glow casting a rhythm all its own. Years ago, under that light, someone once carved their initials into the wood of the bench. 2 letters side by side, still visible if you squint just right. Did they wait there every night for someone who never came? Or did they meet just once and carry that moment with them through the rest of their days? Not all streets are gentle. Some carry a darker edge, alleys where voices once rose in fear, where sirens shattered the stillness. Those streets too remember. They do not judge. They simply hold the truth, the beautiful and the brutal, side by side. And then there are the streets that have been forgotten. Roads that used to lead somewhere, but now curl quietly into themselves, overgrown with moss and memory. No one walks there anymore except maybe time. But if you follow them, if you let yourself get lost, they'll reward you. Perhaps not with answers, but with a sense of something bigger than you, something slow and patient and wise. You see, every street has a rhythm. A kind of heartbeat, slow and steady, built from years of repetition. Footsteps, rain, laughter, grief. It's in the way the wind moves between buildings, or how the leaves gather in one corner, like they always do. It's in the timing of the stray cat that crosses at exactly the same time every night. In the puddle that never quite dries, no matter how long it's been since the last rain. When you live in a place long enough, you stop seeing it. You rush over the same paths every day and forget to look. But at night, when you pause, the streets unfold their layers. You realize they've always been alive, just quiet about it. There's something deeply comforting about a road that stays. About knowing that whatever happens, the path will still be there tomorrow. That even as people move away, fall in love, grow old, leave or return, the street remains. Watching, remembering, offering its quiet presence like a friend who doesn't need words. So tonight, if you find yourself walking alone beneath the moon, slow down. Take your headphones out. Let your feet fall a little softer. Listen. Not for the sound of traffic or voices, but for the memory beneath it all, of all who have come before you and all who will come after. Let the streets tell you their stories, because every path is sacred in its own quiet way. And every night, while the city sleeps, they remember, not in noise but in stillness, not in spotlight but in the glow of a flickering lamp. And sometimes, if you're lucky, the road will whisper back. The quiet thread of time. They don't announce themselves with fireworks or fanfare. They don't shout to be noticed. They don't demand attention. And yet they're there. Always have been. Old roads. Worn stone. A creaking wooden gate that swings open just slightly in the wind. The steady curve of a river bending its way through the valley like it has for centuries. These things, we pass by them. We may glance, but we rarely stop. We rarely ask, "What have you seen?" But if they could answer, they wouldn't raise their voices. They wouldn't rush to tell stories of battles or revolutions. They'd whisper about smaller things. A child's first step on a dirt path. A woman returning every morning to the same well. A man who planted the same tree season after season, not because he hoped to see it grow, but because that's what his father did. You see, some things in this world don't change in leaps and bounds. Some things evolve the way a mountain becomes a hill, slowly, almost imperceptibly. And yet, over time, everything is different. These quiet witnesses of time, the old roads, the stone bridges, the rice fields curved like prayers, are not here because they resisted change. They're here because they embraced it in its gentlest form: repetition. Repetition is underrated. In our world today, we value the breakthrough, the transformation, the before and after. We want drama. We want a turning point. We wait for something spectacular to happen to tell us, yes, now your life has begun. But what if the real story lies not in those moments of change, but in the long, uninterrupted thread that connects them all? What if the magic is not in the turning point, but in the walk itself? The way your feet hit the ground again and again, day after day, year after year. Somewhere long before cities hummed with engines, someone laid a stone road. Not to build an empire, but maybe just to get home more easily after rain. Then someone else used it, and someone after that, until the road became a path through generations. No grand opening, no ribbon cut, just footsteps, just time. This is the rhythm of the enduring things, the ones that last not because they are loud but because they are consistent. The temple with moss in its cracks. The wooden bench beneath a tree that blooms every April. The line of houses with their paint faded by sun and memory. They don't claim to be symbols, but they are. They represent connection, not the type you announce on a screen, but the kind you feel when your hand brushes the same banister your grandmother once touched. When the door creaks in exactly the same way it did when you were 10. When a bird nests in the same corner of the roof year after year, like it too remembers. They represent a different kind of evolution, one that doesn't discard the past to make way for the future, but builds upon it like layers of clay on a potter's wheel. Slow, careful, purposeful. Sometimes uneven, but always forming something more whole. There are no headlines in this kind of growth. No defining moments. Just small choices, made and remade, until they become a way of life. Like the farmer who still ties up his boots before sunrise. Like the baker whose hands remember a recipe even when his mind forgets. Like the child who walks the same path to school her mother once did, not because she has to, but because it feels right. History isn't always made in storms. Sometimes it's stitched in silence. So we must learn to notice the quiet. Notice how the light hits the corner of your childhood home in the late afternoon. Notice how the trees sway differently depending on the season, yet remain rooted. Notice how people age in ways that don't always show on the surface. How resilience isn't loud but lives deep in the spine. And when you find yourself searching for meaning, when you feel lost in the noise, in the chaos of a world that worships speed, remember this: the most lasting things are often the most unremarkable. An old cobblestone alley may not change the world, but it has seen the world change, over and over again, and it still holds. These are not monuments to glory. They're markers of endurance. Feel the stillness they offer, not as emptiness but as presence, as invitation, to slow down, to breathe, to remember that time is not always something we race against. Sometimes it's something we walk with, and when we do, we become part of the rhythm too. Not in grand ways perhaps, but in real ones. We open the same door every morning. We greet the same neighbor. We water the same plant. We pass the same corner of the street where someone else once stood, watching the same sky. And without knowing it, we continue the story. The one that isn't written in ink, but in footsteps, in echoes, in routines. This is the beauty of a life lived in quiet connection. Of a world that holds us not with noise, but with memory. With places that remember us, even when we forget ourselves. With roads that wait patiently even when we don't come. So here's to the unnoticed, the uncelebrated, to the stone paths and wooden beams, to the moss and rust and dust, to the constancy that doesn't clamor for recognition, but offers its shoulders for each generation to stand on. They may not be spectacular, but they are sacred. They may not look like progress, but they are the foundation for everything that moves forward. And so, the next time you walk down an old path, take a moment. Pause. Listen. You might not hear anything, but in that silence, something ancient speaks. A gentle farewell to the day. By the time you hear these words, the world has already begun to exhale. There's a quiet shift that happens when the day folds itself away. It doesn't shout. It doesn't announce its departure with fireworks or fanfare. No. Evening arrives like a kind friend who lets themselves in without knocking, who knows where the tea is kept, who doesn't ask you to speak unless you feel like it. Tonight, like every night, you are being invited, not commanded, not forced, to let go. Not everything, just enough. Enough of the spinning thoughts. Enough of the to-do lists written in invisible ink behind your eyelids. Enough of the weight you didn't even notice you were carrying. This is not the time to fix anything. Not the time to plan, to explain, to prove, or to push. No one needs you to be anywhere else but here. Right now your only task is this: rest. And I know, it's not always easy. Sometimes sleep feels like a stranger. Sometimes closing your eyes feels like trying to quiet a room full of whispering memories. But tonight you're not expected to conquer anything. Not even your own mind. Instead, let's try something simpler. Just notice the way your body touches the bed. The way the air moves gently in and out of you, without needing your permission. The way gravity quietly says, "I've got you. You've made it through another day." That matters. You may not have done everything you planned, and maybe some parts didn't go how you hoped. But even in all that, you were here. You lived it. You showed up. And now the day is done. It has given you all it had. It has nothing more to ask of you. The sky outside is pulling its dark blanket overhead, tucking in the stars. Even the moon is softening. The wind is quieter now, as if it too knows how sacred this time is. Imagine, if you like, that the whole world is whispering to you. It's okay to let go now. It's okay to rest. You don't have to hold everything tonight. Because rest is not a weakness. It's not a pause in your importance. It is part of your rhythm, like the tide that must retreat in order to rise again. And your body? It knows this ancient rhythm. It knows how to relax, how to mend, how to dream. You don't have to force it. Just trust it. Trust that the breath you're taking now is already halfway to sleep. Trust that your heart, your skin, your muscles and bones are all slowly unclenching, releasing, softening. And as your body softens, so does the mind. You might still hear a few stray thoughts knocking around up there, like guests who don't know when the party's over. That's all right. You don't need to argue with them or explain anything. Just open the window and let them drift out into the dark, like leaves on a river. You don't need to follow them. Stay here. Stay with this moment. Listen. No more decisions tonight. No more analyzing. No more measuring yourself against impossible yardsticks. Tonight you are enough exactly as you are. Not because of what you've done or not done. Just because you are. Your worth does not sleep when you do. It stays like a quiet flame, steady and true. And now, as you sink deeper into the comfort beneath you, imagine yourself floating, not up into the sky but inward, into a place where time loosens its grip, where the mind becomes water, and thoughts become ripples that fade without effort. Maybe you'll dream. Maybe you won't. Either way, you'll go somewhere the waking world can't follow. Somewhere soft. Somewhere safe. And if you need an image to hold on to, imagine this. You are lying on a quiet hill under a night sky that stretches forever. You feel the grass beneath you, the earth gently cradling your weight. Above, stars blink slowly like they're breathing with you. There's no noise, no rush, just the steady pulse of stillness. The universe is wide, and yet, here in this moment, you fit perfectly within it. Let that image carry you. Let it rock you like a lullaby that needs no melody. Because the truth is, the world will keep turning while you sleep. The sun will prepare its return, the trees will keep growing in their silence, and nothing will fall apart while you rest. So let the edges blur. Let the world grow soft around you. You've done enough. You are enough. And now it's time to let the sleep come in. Let it wash over you like warm rain on tired soil. Let it find all the places in you that have waited quietly for this chance to be still. Let it mend what it can, hold what it must, and carry the rest away on the wind. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to earn this sleep. It is yours by birthright. It comes not as a prize but as a promise. And I'll leave you here now wrapped in that promise. With a whisper, not a goodbye but a gentle see you soon. May you drift far and deep. May the night be kind. May your dreams be strange in the best of ways. And may you wake, whenever that may be, just a little more whole than before. Good night, dear soul. We'll meet again, somewhere quiet, somewhere soft, in the next dream. If you're feeling relaxed, consider hitting the subscribe button on HistoryNook and turning on notifications so you won't miss our next quiet journeys. Or simply let this sound carry you deeper into a peaceful sleep. And now, as the journey of the roads has quietly come to an end, let your mind fully let go. Feel the relaxation spreading throughout your body. Breathe steadily and gently drift into a peaceful sleep. Everything is left behind. Sleep well. See you again in your dreams.